Commodities, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 Eastern, 8:30 Pacific.
Well, as we said before the break, Shaw has big plans to get bigger with its purchase of CanWest Broadcasting assets and its plan to get into wireless. Now, for some insight into Shaw's wireless plans, we're joined in studio by Jon Arnold. He is a telecom analyst with J. Arnold and Associates. So what do you think of Shaw's strategy? It seems, from what we were hearing from the president of Shaw there a couple of minutes ago, that they're going to do a little bit of a leapfrog over this 3G generation that we're living in right now and go on to offer LTE, or kind of colloquially called 4G. Is that a good strategy?
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's great. You know, depending on your time horizon, this is a very well-timed entry and a great story for a lot of reasons. But if you go back a few years, you know, BCE went down this road several years ago. You know, we're kind of, this becomes the convergence story, which was a nightmare at the time because they acquired all these media assets to own the pipe, to own the content, and you figured they would have everything. But that was then, and the technologies to support these things weren't in place like they are today. So in a lot of ways, Shaw's timing is really great because we have this 4G technology, and the story really is mobile content going over broadband networks. So when we talk about getting into the wireless business, the first thing I say to people is, this isn't about telephony.
Right. Or mobile telephony. If it is about telephony, it's about mobile telephony.
That's right. Mobility today is all about video and data. So it's not to make phone calls. I always say making a phone call is the last thing you do with an iPhone. It's about everything else. And Shaw is kind of at the right place, the right time in a lot of ways for this.
Okay, so among Rogers, Bell, and TELUS, let's see, we get another entrant in there and possibly more coming in. Is this going to actually result in lower subscription fees?
Well, I don't think Shaw's entry is going to change the pricing for telephony for mobility. I think that's being driven by the pure plays, right? Wind, Mobilicity, Public Mobile. They're chasing an entirely different segment of the market, and frankly, it's one I don't think they're going to have a lot of success with long term. There are just too many players, too small a market, too small of an available market to be served by, you know, straight up telephone service at a low fixed price. But they will drive the price down for everyday use. But when you're talking about broadband, you know, they just announced the iPad pricing yesterday, and there are no flat rate data plans for this product in Canada with Rogers right now. And that's an example of kind of where the bar is being set, so that the operators aren't ready to really drop pricing, because there's no need to yet. You know, they still have to gain some sense of equilibrium of supply and demand. How much data are people really going to use? And when Shaw puts all this content over their networks, much like what Videotron is doing in Quebec, it's the same strategy, and I think those are the ones that are going to succeed best long term, because they have more elements to bring, not just in offerings, but in revenue streams. The pure play mobile operators have one product to sell. It's mostly voice. Okay. These guys are selling everything.
They're selling everything, and I want to get some idea, a description of what the word or the term spectrum means. From what I understand, Shaw is going to have about 2 licenses, and other competitors like Rogers have upwards of 10. So what sort of space do these, are they going to directly compete because they have similar amounts of spectrum?
Well, they'll compete regionally. I mean, Shaw is a regional mobile operator, whereas Bell, TELUS, and Rogers are the national operators, right? They have spectrum everywhere. When the auction happened last year, when the licenses were awarded, they were all regional plays. Like Videotron was just Quebec, you know, Wind was everywhere but Quebec, and Shaw has got a Western Canada license. So they're going to compete in their local market, whereas they'll be competing against all the national mobile players. So there will be a lot of activity there. But for example, you know, Videotron's mobile service won't be competing against Shaw out west because they don't have a license to compete. So these spectrum licenses are fairly regionalized for the new entrants, and Shaw has, you know, as you know, they wisely waited to enter the market. They felt the conditions weren't right last year, but I think it's a good move, actually, now that they have CanWest. It changes everything.
Is the iPod a game changer, we've been wondering?
The The iPod?
Or the iPad.
Okay, yeah, there's the iPad, iPhone. Oh boy, there's. I think, I know, I guess, right? Yeah, the iPad. It's too early to tell. It's really a media device. You know, sure, it's a passive reader for books, and I think there's a business to be built around that. All the booksellers are getting into this game, right? Amazon and Barnes & Noble in the States. But it's also a bigger picture data device for supporting video and streaming, but it's a little clunky to be carrying around every day, right? It's not like your iPhone.
Doesn't fit in your purse in the same way. What I wanted to ask you about is I pressed Peter Bissonnette yesterday to say, you know, which vendors are you looking at? Because he said, I'm looking at a few, and he said the top 4. Can you give us some idea? What are we talking about? Sort of Apple, BlackBerry, HTC, for the vendors that he's looking at working with for wireless?
Oh, for devices,
yeah.
Sure. Invariably, it will have to be, though. I mean, those players all need to get into the game, and of course, every new market opportunity is. They don't want to miss any of these. The key is that with 4G, that all these smartphones will be able to support this particular network. That's the advantage, of course, that Rogers had with their network initially. That was the only one that Apple could play in. But I think once 4G is here, all the major handsets will be able to support them. And I think for a lot, any of these new entrants like this, they have to gauge what the demand really is like, and also what their key competitors are doing. Because out west, you know, they are competing against TELUS for the local wireless business, but then you have to be on par with what Rogers and Bell are offering too, because they're all national players. It's crowded. But, you know, Shaw does have a product mix that the other guys won't be able to match. And it's going to be a great story to watch. And a Canadian story, by the way. No foreign ownership issues here.
There you go. Good to get your insight, as always.
Thank you
for coming in.
Thank you.
Guest has been Jon Arnold, telecom analyst with J. Arnold and Associates, and that's going to do it for The Street.
That's right. Marty and Francis are up next with Market Morning.
You're watching Canada's Business News Network.